In April 1956, a rusted truck driver from New Jersey did something that would accidentally reshape human civilization. He didn't cure a disease, he didn't split an atom, he didn't write code or discover anything scientific. He just got tired of waiting. His name was Malcolm McLean, and on that spring day, he loaded 58 aluminum truck bodies onto a refitted oil tanker and sailed from Newark to Houston. People barely noticed. The longshoremen on the docks thought it was a stunt. Shipping executives dismissed it as impractical. Economists didn't even bother analyzing it. But here's what nobody saw coming. Within 20 years, this boring metal rectangle would do what centuries of political negotiations, trade agreements, and diplomatic summits couldn't. It would erase economic borders, collapse distances, and make your morning coffee possible. Because before this box existed, global trade was essentially broken. And what's wild is that nobody realized just how broken it was until someone finally fixed it. Let me take you back to 1954. Malcolm McLean is sitting in his truck in Hoboken, New Jersey, watching his cargo get unloaded, piece by piece, box by box, hour after hour. He's been waiting for 6 hours, not because his cargo is complicated, not because the ship isn't ready, but because moving stuff from a truck onto a ship required an army of workers manually handling every single item. And as he sat there, burning daylight and hemorrhaging money, McLean had a thought that seemed almost childishly simple. What if we didn't unload the truck at all? What if the entire trailer just lifted onto the ship? Now this sounds obvious to us, but in 1954 it was borderline insane. Because the entire infrastructure of global trade, ports, ships, trains, warehouses, was built around the idea that cargo comes in infinite shapes and sizes. Barrels of oil, crates of machinery, sacks of grain, pallets of bananas. Every item required custom handling. Every transfer meant human labor. Every port had different systems. This wasn't just inefficient. It was a bottleneck strangling the entire world economy. But here's what people didn't understand yet. The problem wasn't the ships. The problem wasn't the cargo. The problem was the interface between them. Picture a cargo ship in 1950. It arrives in New York Harbor after 2 weeks crossing the Atlantic. Now unloading begins. Longshoremen swarm the vessel, dozens, sometimes hundreds of them. Each item gets lifted by crane, swung to the dock, and manually stacked. If you were shipping 10,000 tons of mixed cargo, unloading could take a full week. 1 week. And during that week, you're paying dock fees, labor costs, ship idle time, insurance, storage. The ship itself was fast, modern, efficient, but it spent more time sitting still than moving. Here's the number that should make your jaw drop. In the 1950s, cargo ships spent more than half their operational life docked in ports, not sailing, not working, just waiting. Because the act of moving cargo between transportation modes was so labor-intensive that it became the single biggest constraint in global trade, and nobody was solving it. They were trying to make ships faster, engines more powerful, routes more direct, but they were optimizing the wrong thing. Malcolm McLean understood something profound. You can't fix a system problem with a component solution. So in 1956, McLean did something radical. He bought a shipping company, then he bought an old oil tanker, then he ripped out its guts and redesigned it to carry truck trailers. His first voyage carried 58 trailers from New Jersey to Texas. The industry laughed. "It'll never scale," they said. "Ports aren't built for this," they argued. "You can't standardize cargo," they insisted. But McLean didn't care about being right. He cared about being profitable. And the numbers told a story that was impossible to ignore. Before containers, moving cargo cost $5.86 per ton. After containers, 16 cents per ton. Read that again. Not a 10% improvement, not even a 50% improvement, a 97% cost reduction. Suddenly, shipping wasn't about moving goods, it was about moving boxes, and those boxes didn't care what was inside them. But here's where the story gets interesting, because McLean's invention didn't succeed immediately. In fact, it almost failed. The problem wasn't the container itself. The container was brilliant. The problem was that one standardized box threatened to destroy entire industries built around non-standardized cargo. Longshoremen saw their jobs disappearing. Port cities saw their economies crumbling. Shipping companies saw massive infrastructure costs. In New York alone, there were over 50,000 longshoremen in the 1950s. By 1980, fewer than 10,000. This wasn't progress to them. It was an extinction event. Labor unions fought viciously. They went on strike. They lobbied governments. They tried to regulate containers out of existence. And for a while, it worked. Many ports refused to adopt the technology. Governments stayed neutral. Investors remained skeptical. McLean's company nearly went bankrupt. But then something unexpected happened: the Vietnam War. In 1965, the U.S. military had a supply chain nightmare. They needed to move massive amounts of supplies to Southeast Asia, and traditional shipping was drowning in inefficiency. So they tried containers, and it changed everything. Suddenly, military cargo that took weeks to unload in Saigon took hours. Supply chains that were constantly breaking stayed fluid. The Pentagon realized they'd found something revolutionary. And when the military adopts something, industries pay attention. By the 1970s, container shipping wasn't just growing, it was devouring the entire industry. Old port cities like New York and London saw their docks decay into abandoned ruins. Why? Because containers required specific infrastructure: deep-water ports, massive cranes, automated systems, rail connections. You couldn't just retrofit an old port. You needed to build from scratch. So new ports exploded in importance. Singapore went from a regional player to a global hub. Rotterdam became Europe's gateway. Los Angeles transformed into America's shipping capital. Entire cities reorganized their economies around these metal boxes. But the real transformation wasn't about ports. It was about what containers made possible. Here's the thing about cheap shipping that nobody talks about. When transportation costs collapse, geography stops being destiny. Before containers, manufacturing had to happen near consumers. It was too expensive to ship goods halfway around the world. But after containers, you could manufacture a phone in China, ship it to California, and still make a profit. This wasn't just convenient, it was economically revolutionary. Companies realized they could separate production from consumption. Design in California, manufacture in Taiwan, assemble in Mexico, sell everywhere. Global supply chains became possible not because of computers or the internet, but because a standardized metal box made logistics cheap enough to ignore. The container didn't just connect the world, it dissolved economic borders. Let me give you a number that illustrates this. In 1960, global merchandise trade was worth about $300 billion. By 2000, $6.5 trillion. That's not a typo. A 20x increase in 40 years. Not because people wanted more stuff, not because ships got faster, but because containers made moving goods so cheap that distance became almost irrelevant. Your iPhone contains parts from 43 countries, not because Apple wanted complexity, but because containers made complexity profitable. The shirt you're wearing probably traveled further than most humans did in the 1950s, and it cost less than a single postage stamp. That's the hidden power of the container. It didn't just connect the world, it made connection economically inevitable. But here's what really blows my mind about this story. The container succeeded not because it was high-tech, not because it was smart, not because it was complicated. It succeeded because it was boring. One size, one shape, one set of corner fittings. That standardization was the entire innovation. Because once you standardize the interface, everything else becomes modular. Cranes could be designed once and used everywhere. Ships could be built identically across continents. Trains could connect seamlessly to ports. The container created a universal language for moving stuff. And once everyone spoke that language, the entire system reorganized itself. This is the pattern we keep seeing throughout history. USB ports, electrical outlets, internet protocols, credit card standards. The most transformative technologies are often the least sexy. They don't add features, they remove friction.
Today, the container is everywhere because we almost never see it. It moves through ports, oceans, warehouses, and into your phone, your shirt, your coffee, your shoes. It made distance cheaper, production global, and connection inevitable. A boring box became a hidden engine of history, from chance to Mainspring.